The leader of one of Venezuela's most notorious gangs, the Tren de Aragua, has been killed by the US. Sharing this footage on social media on the 13th of June, US President Donald Trump described a swift and lethal kinetic strike to successfully execute Niño Guerrero. But what does this mean for the criminal group in question, Tren de Aragua, as well as organized crime in Venezuela and further afield?
O sea, el futuro creo que es la fragmentación, para después de la fragmentación empezar a depurar una especie de nuevo Tren de Aragua mucho más violento, mucho más resiliente y con mucha más experiencia.
Niño Guerrero, also known as Héctor Rostem for Guerrero Flores, was the notorious leader of the organized criminal group Tren de Aragua, a gang which was formed in Tocorón prison, which also operated as the organization's headquarters.
Niño Guerrero built the reputation of Tren de Aragua through extortion, kidnapping, and bribing state officials. He was in and out of prison, escaped and was recaptured, and somehow managed to attend parties outside of prison before eventually being sentenced to 17 years for drug trafficking, murder, and escaping the jail at Tocorón. While he was incarcerated, Tren de Aragua expanded its control into gold mines, drug trafficking routes, and border crossings. Niño Guerrero's power grew, living in a two-story house inside the prison, as well as having access to all manner of luxuries, such as a swimming pool and restaurants. That was until September 2023, when 11,000 heavily armed Venezuelan soldiers entered the Tren de Aragua Nerve Center in Tocorón prison, but Niño escaped.
De hecho, Niño Guerrero desaparece en ese momento desde las cárceles. Y para algunos investigadores tenemos una duda, si esta fue la mayor operación contra las cárceles o es la mayor fuga de criminales que hemos tenido en la historia en América Latina.
The cartel has been involved in drug trafficking, extortion and kidnapping, human trafficking, and even cybercrime, expanding from Venezuela into Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, Brazil, and the United States. Guerrero was reportedly killed in Las Claritas, a town located in the Venezuelan Amazon. Las Claritas and the surrounding area of Bolivar State is the epicenter of gold mining in Venezuela, where several criminal groups, including the Tren de Aragua, have controlled illicit mines and managed gold and drug trafficking routes for over a decade. The activities of Tren de Aragua and Niño Guerrero didn't go unnoticed by the United States. In 2024, the US Department of State offered a reward of $5 million for information leading to the conviction or arrest of Niño Guerrero. 6 months later, the US then also designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. And in December 2025, the US charged Niño Guerrero with terrorism, drug importation, racketeering, and firearm offenses.
The US has designated 14 criminal organizations from Latin America and the Caribbean as FTOs in the past 18 months, since the start of the second Trump administration. So in November last year, the US also designated the Cartel de los Soles, an alleged criminal organization from Venezuela, as a foreign terrorist organization. And this led to military intervention in the country and the US arrest of Nicolás Maduro. But we have been monitoring the situation, and we have seen that designating these groups as foreign terrorist organizations has done little to halt their territorial reach and economic power throughout the region.
The operation by the US to take out Niño Guerrero is an example of the kingpin strategy, which involves removing the head of a criminal organization.
The kingpin strategy, in fact, generates more violence because you tend to destabilize existing arrangements precisely of how criminal markets operate. And so what we see is that, A, they tend to generate more violence, and also criminal organizations over time have adapted to respond to the kingpin strategy. So the proposed policy is that rather than focusing on alleged kingpin that symbolically could be and make headlines, is that if you really want to weaken these structures, you ought to remove these management structures, and you would want to have an operation, for instance, that goes after many people at the managerial level at the same time, similar to operations against organized crime that we see in European context. And so the concern is, again, that while symbolically it can mean a lot, especially to some law enforcement organizations, we know that the kingpin strategy tends to produce more violence and does not eliminate the criminal market that it seeks to eliminate.
O sea, la marca Tren de Aragua va a continuar en el tiempo, por mucho tiempo probablemente. Eso independiente de que caigan los liderazgos conocidos, la marca se va a potenciar. Lo que yo creo que va a suceder es un fragmentamiento muy fuerte, una fragmentación muy fuerte de estructuras que van a ser más identitarias, que sin desconocer el Tren de Aragua como la marca principal van a empezar a tener su identidad propia, con un nombre propio, con una forma de vinculación propia, con economías propias.
The impact of Niño Guerrero's death remains uncertain. Organized criminal networks in Venezuela and across the wider Americas are entering a new phase, which could have substantial implications.